Is there a place and time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere at some time along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable. Makeshift Stories presents Episode 306, A New Star in Aries, read by Kathleen Connolly. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdmann. Somewhere and sometime, a new object in the night sky as bright as Venus might not be a good omen.
Hollis waited impatiently at the Academy's gate for the challenge machine to finish printing a strip of paper. She tore it off and read the randomly selected questions. The Earth is the center of the universe. True, false, maybe. Humans walked on the moon? True, false, maybe. After 20 years, she still wasn't comfortable with the daily test. Reluctantly, she placed her right hand on the lie detector and answered, true, false. A few tense seconds passed while the ancient circuits did whatever they did. How they worked was no longer understood. Some claimed the device possessed a spirit that could read every thought in a human mind. Others suspected the circuits were living cells harvested from a psychic that sensed a person's aura and watched for the subtle dimming of uncertainty. Once, a minority believed complex predictive math was involved, but that would have meant the machine was just a calculator from before the Great Reformation and had no moral compass. That minority had long ago been discredited. A light on the detector flicked green, and Hollis let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "Good morning, Professor Cooper," a burly guard said, automatically adding, "May you teach and study truth." The guard pressed an icon, and the gate to the campus swung open. Hollis walked through. Inside the walls, students wandered around the grounds, looking for their classes. It was the first day of the new session. Electronic signage tacked to the ancient buildings on rusting metal frameworks announced events, timetable changes, showed ads from the Academy's sponsors, and regurgitated the mandatory slogans for the day. Hollis had intentionally arrived early. Her first class was in the afternoon, which gave her time to work on research. Ignoring the students, she walked past the Grand Hall of Business and Capital before turning onto a path through the central court to a squat gray building nicknamed the Hovel. The Hovel housed the departments of moral rhetoric, alchemy, and astrology. Like all modern academies, the only degrees offered were in business and economics. The other faculties provided the students insight into other fields to make them better managers. Some graduates used astrology, Hollis's area of research, to guide corporate decisions. She gave famous examples in her first lecture to highlight the importance of her subject to the otherwise disinterested students. "Hollis!" She spun around. Running to catch up, her colleague and friend Dane Bonatti waved. He stopped to catch his breath, then walked the rest of the distance, holding one hand on his heaving chest. "You're only in your 30s, Dane," Hollis scolded. "You need to take better care of yourself." "Are you teaching right away?" Dane gasped. "No, why?" "There's something in the archives you need to see." "So, you finally found something worthwhile in that 3rd century manuscript?" Hollis laughed. Dane shook his head, looked around and whispered conspiratorially, "No, it's something else. Something way more urgent." They made their way to the Hovel's basement, then walked down a dimly lit hall that ended at a door with a sign that read, Astrological Archives. Dane pushed through, revealing a brightly lit room packed with bookshelves. The only open space near the front was occupied by several desks with comfortable chairs. A surprised student had been pushing a cart along one of the rows, stopping periodically to take a book and place it back into the stacks. "Anna, you can have the rest of the morning off," Dane directed. He followed the young woman out, then locked the entrance after she had left. "Is that necessary?" Hollis asked. "Please, just sit." Hollis settled into a big chair while Dane retrieved a dented metal equipment case from the stacks. He placed it on the desk and carefully opened the lid, revealing an ancient electronic helmet bristling with sensors nestled in foam packing. Before Hollis could stop him, Dane pushed the device over her head. The thing beeped to life. Hollis's eyes went wide. She gripped the arms of her chair, dropped her head to her chest, grimaced, then smiled knowingly. The device shut off and she removed it. "I'm not sure what we'd do without the blocker," she sighed, putting the headset back in its case. "And the administration still thinks it's an ancient brain imaging device I'm adapting for the challenge machines," Dane laughed. "If they only knew what they were really funding. Come on, there's something you need to see." Dane picked up the case and reshelved it. Together they walked through the stacks to the special collections area, where Dane took a key from his pocket, looked around, and pushed a cabinet aside, revealing a keyhole and entry pad. He inserted the key and typed in a code. A section of the wall slid aside. "After you." Hollis stepped into the hidden room, alive with electronics, forbidden relics of the time before the Great Moral Reformation. Large, flat-screen monitors covered one wall, all dark at the moment. A handful of ancient computer workstations hummed. Rows of them had once filled the room. Their skeletons were now stacked along one wall. Sacrifices to their brethren's health. "I've managed to revive an orbital telescope," Dane boasted. "It was just a matter of conserving electricity until it had a large enough charge to get one gyro working. Then I aligned its solar panels with the sun. We've already imaged the new asteroid." Hollis took a seat at one of the workstations. "Can I see the new data?" Dane reached around her and tapped on the keyboard. One of the large monitors at the front of the room flickered to life, displaying a graph. "That's still not enough." Disappointed, Hollis complained, leaning back in her chair. "It passed the Earth last week. I had hoped we could calculate how the encounter changed its orbit. I'm going to rerun the calculations with what we have." An hour later, Hollis looked up from her work. She flagged Dane and called him over. "There's a wide variance. The chance it'll hit is between 2 and 80% on its next pass. But if the drift rate continues, the chance of a collision will be at the high end of that range," Dane concluded. Hollis's watch buzzed. "Oh no, I'm late for class." She jumped up and rushed for the door. "Wait, you need to use the blocker before you go." "No time, I'll do it at the end of the day," she assured. Dane was concerned. "It's a risk. What if you have to take the challenge? Being late for the first lecture of the new term is a risk too. And besides, getting challenged inside the campus wall isn't very likely. Unless there's a sweep or you accidentally say the wrong thing," Dane called after her. But it was too late. Hollis had already left, securing the hidden door behind her. By the time she arrived at the lecture hall, it was buzzing with gossiping students. Still breathing hard, Hollis tried to look calm as she unpacked her books and notes on the lectern. "Ahem," she cleared her throat. Hollis hated teaching first-year astrology. Everyone did. Most of the students were only there because the course was mandatory. "Ahem." She cleared her throat again, then banged a heavy textbook on the lectern. The room reluctantly settled to silence. "I'm Professor Hollis Cooper, and welcome to Astrology 1000. For some of you, this will be the one and only astrology course you ever take. So, my goal is that by the end, some of you might be able to interpret your birth chart. In fact, that will be the final exam. The course will cover the planets, sun signs, houses, modalities, and the essential dignities of planets: exalted, detriment, domicile, and fall. This month, Venus will be retrograde when the planet catches up and passes the Earth. Can anyone tell me what a retrograde Venus means for your personal outlook?" A hand in the front row immediately went up. "Yes, and you are?" "Caspian Tran." A youth in a casually expensive jacket replied. Hollis's heart stopped. Caspian Tran, the son of Pontifex Tran, the minister of moral compliance, was in her class? How much worse could things get? How can Venus catch up to the Earth when it orbits us? He stated defiantly. She cursed. She had been so focused on calculating the asteroid's new orbit that it had just slipped out. She should have listened to Dane and blocked that part of her mind. But there was nothing she could do now. Does anyone know what the impact of a retrograde Venus is? She asked again, hoping the class would ignore her break with Cannon. Another student put up her hand. Yes? It depends which house Venus is in, the young woman said confidently. Correct. I'm glad some of you remember the basics. Hollis dared a glance at Caspian Tran. The kid, arms folded, was glaring at her. Dane was studying a graph on a workstation when Hollis slipped through the hidden door to the control room. She slumped into a seat beside him. I should have listened to you, she admitted. I made a mistake in class. Dane looked away from his screen. How bad? I said Venus would catch up and pass the Earth. A kid picked it up, I corrected myself. But I'm not sure the kid bought it. Worse, he's Pontifex Tran's son. The color drained from Dane's face. Hollis, there's fewer of us every year. We can't afford accidents. We can barely keep the knowledge alive with what's left of the old research network. We have the last working data link to the old orbital platforms. Once that's gone? Okay, I should have listened to you. I won't leave here again without using the blocker. If they call me in, as long as I've locked my knowledge, moral compliance will never be able to tease it out. They'll lose interest eventually, she hoped. That could be weeks or never if you're investigated, Dane complained. We need your expertise in orbital mechanics. Look at this. He moved over so Hollis could see the graph he had been analyzing. More data from the new telescope? Yes, a spectral graph from a direct image. The asteroid is about 150 meters across, type M, and has a metal core, most likely nickel iron. If it hits, it'll reach the ground, Hollis concluded grimly. Dane got up and began pacing. Your slip-up couldn't have come at a worse time. You're sure it's going to hit? Yes. CERN got back to us while you were in class. They risked using their AI. It made the prediction. It's 100%. Can CERN determine where it will impact? No. They used their entire energy budget to refine the orbit. Calculating the impact zone would put them over and risk exposing the lab's existence. If we lose CERN, we lose the knowledge network. So it's up to us. Once we get its next position from the space telescope, you're going to have to calculate the impact zone manually. Let's hope you're not under investigation. You can't do the projection while you're blocked. Hollis was in the astrology department archives preparing for her next class when the dean's summons arrived. It said only, "Follow up on student complaint," along with a date, place, and time. A knot began to grow in her stomach. "What's wrong?" Dane asked. "You look as if someone just walked over your grave." Hollis showed him the message. "Not good," he grunted, brushing a hand through his thinning hair. "We'll have to block your awareness of science, the hidden room, your research, and any memory of the knowledge network. You'll only remember that you're helping me with my work on the helmet. That's a lot of memory blocks, Hollis. There's a risk that some of it might be permanent." Dane retrieved the blocker and made several adjustments before placing the device on Hollis's head. It hummed to life. She winced, then opened her eyes, confused for a second. "Dane, your ancient brainwave monitor doesn't do anything. But I have a headache now. Here," she handed the blocker back to him. "Maybe the spirit has left its circuits. You should throw that piece of pre-Reformation junk back into the dump where you found it." "Just humor me, Hollis. I want to try again after you meet with the dean. It'll be the last time, I promise. Fine, she sighed, checking her watch. The astrology office was in the administrative wing of the Grand Hall of Business and Capital, down a narrow back passage with the other deans of elective programs. Hesitantly, Hollis opened the door and found herself in a modest waiting room. "The dean is waiting for you in his office," the receptionist explained, getting up, leading Hollis to a door with a brass plate. She knocked. "Professor Cooper is here." "Show her in," a muffled voice directed. The receptionist opened the door and Hollis entered. A portable challenge machine on a cart was positioned beside an uncomfortable plastic chair. Behind an enormous wood desk sat the grim-looking dean and the campus director of moral compliance. "Please sit, Professor Cooper," the dean instructed. Hollis took the only open chair, the plastic seat next to the challenge machine. "This is just a formality," the dean assured without conviction. An aide appeared from nowhere and wired Hollis to the challenge machine. She ran a belt across Hollis's torso and wrapped sensors around her arms. Hollis kept reminding herself that she had nothing to fear, but something deep in her mind was concerned. "Let's begin," the director said, consulting a clipboard. "First, a few control questions. You are Hollis Cooper, true or false?" Hollis woke with a start. Her phone was ringing. She fumbled for it, knocking it on the floor before picking it up. "Hello?" she stuttered. "Hollis? It's Dane. I was concerned when you didn't come back to the archives." "Where are you?" he asked. Hollis began to gather her thoughts. She had fallen asleep on the couch of her apartment. Disoriented, she got up and stumbled to the window. Below, her new shadow sat patiently on a bench across the street, pretending to read a magazine. "I'm at home," she finally replied. "Sorry, I should have called you. The challenge was grueling. I needed to sleep afterward, so I came here. Because the complaint came from Pontifex Tran's son, the administration is being extra careful. They've assigned a monitor who's sitting across the street right now." Static filled the line. "Oh," Dane finally replied, voice strained. "Fine, I guess. Look, I still need you back here to complete testing of the modifications I'm researching for that brain imaging device." Sure," Hollis agreed. "As long as you don't mind a monitor from Moral Compliance watching. For the next month, he's going to be my shadow." When Hollis and her monitor arrived at the astrological archives, Dane was waiting with the brain imager laid out and ready. "Great timing, I just finished setting up." Dane motioned for Hollis to sit down. The monitor took up residence at a nearby desk and began distractedly flipping through a magazine he had brought. Dane slipped the image over his friend's head and whispered, "Just relax and don't act surprised." He glanced at the monitor and then switched the device on. Pain immediately erupted behind Hollis's eyes. She tried not to wince, letting out an inadvertent yelp. The monitor glanced her way. She acknowledged him with a forced smile. The world around her shifted, objects taking on new meaning. Her monitor becoming the edge of a dangerous accretion disk surrounding the black hole that was Moral Compliance. Black hole? Hollis suddenly knew they weren't pre-Reformation myths. They were real. She had studied the math and observational data. Dane took the imager off and handed Hollis a stack of paper printouts with a note scribbled on a scrap taped to the first sheet. "This is the latest positional data from the new space telescope. You have to do the impact calculations here while he watches. Hopefully the monitor will think you're working on next month's charts. We don't have a choice." "Thanks for your help, Professor Cooper," Dane said, packing the ancient helmet away. "As promised, I've pulled the new planetary positions for next month's astrological charts. Let me know if you need any help." He waited a few seconds, then left the archives. Hollis quickly flipped through the thick pile of paper and sighed. "Are you any good at plotting astrological charts?" she asked. The monitor shook his head and returned to reading his magazine. Hollis watched him until she was sure he was bored. Then she started to dig through the new data, transferring the numbers she needed to a blank page. "Looks complex," the monitor said. Hollis jumped. How long had the man been standing behind her? She resisted covering her work. "I didn't know there was so much math involved," the monitor admitted. "I thought the astrological ephemeris tables took care of most of that." "Normally they do, but they don't consider new celestial bodies. There is a new object in Aries. We need to map its path so we can recalculate the charts." She felt it was better to be at least partly truthful if the man understood any higher math. "Oh," he exclaimed. "Will I need to get my chart updated?" "Were you born in March or April?" "No." "Then it won't affect you," Hollis assured. The man exhaled, stretched, got bored, then sat at another desk and began flipping through last month's horoscopes, stopping to examine the illustrations. Hollis went back to her calculations. Near the end of the day, Dane returned. "I've got some updates for you," he announced, glancing at the monitor, who was walking mindlessly between the stacks, stopping to examine the cover of the odd text. He handed Hollis a sheet of paper. On the bottom corner he had written, "Are you finished?" "Yes," she scribbled, adding, "I need access to the lab to map the ground plot. Distract the monitor. It'll only take 5 minutes." Dane nodded and walked over to intercept the man. "I need help to move some shelving at the front. Surely moral compliance can spare a few minutes. You can lock the archive door so your subject can't escape." He smiled. The man hesitated. "Come on, please. What can Professor Cooper get up to? She'll be locked in the archives. Your department has approved everything in here." The monitor glared at Hollis. She shrugged. "He's right. I can't go anywhere with the door locked." "Hey, I heard your department head is an Aries," she lied, taking a chance the monitor didn't know. "There'll be a long waiting list once word gets out about the new object. If you help Dane, I'll redo his birth chart first, and you can take it to him. That'll put you in the good books." "Okay, I guess," the man agreed, and Dane led him away. Hollis waited until they were out of sight before heading to the back. She slid the cabinet hiding the secret panel aside, twisted her key in the lock and typed in the code. A wall panel slid silently to the side. Hollis checked around. Seeing no one, she slipped through the opening, leaving the panel slightly ajar to hear Dane and the monitor working at the front of the archives. She chose a workstation near the back, close to the entrance, woke the machine, input her numbers, then leaned back, watching an orbital plot grow across a world map, tracing the path the fiery asteroid would take. Just as it was about to complete, she felt a tap on her shoulder and twisted around to find a gloating Caspian Tran. Her heart almost stopped. "How?" Hollis gasped. "Easy. I hid in the stacks and waited. My father's monitors are idiots. I knew they wouldn't find anything. There could be a whole nest of evil science with a lab like this right under their noses, and they would never notice." He laughed. "When you contradicted canon in class last week, you did it so easily. I knew you believed what you said. It wasn't a mistake. I couldn't let it go." The kid grinned like a cat that had just cornered a particularly crafty mouse. "I told my father I thought you were somehow cheating the challenges, and he let me start my own investigation. He said it would be a good experience for a future Pontifex, and it paid off. I found this place." He nodded at the screen behind Hollis. "And even a first year can tell that isn't an astrological chart." "You're right, it isn't. But it contains a critical prediction. One that affects all of us." "And what is that?" a deep voice said from the hidden room's entrance. Hollis's eyes widened and her mouth fell open. The Pontifex himself stepped in accompanied by a phalanx of guards. Looks like my son's got a talent for sussing out illicit activity. He nodded at Caspian. And this looks like a mother lode. When he first told me what he suspected, I thought he was wrong. I told him everyone occasionally misspeaks, especially when rushed or under pressure. Statistically, we expect a small percentage of misspoken answers. But when we looked at your challenge results, Professor Cooper, they were perfect. Everyone has some doubts, even the most devout. The Pontifex motioned for the guards to flow into the lab. They were carrying wrecking bars and sledgehammers. "No!" Hollis gasped. "You don't know what you're destroying. We found a new asteroid, and it's headed directly toward Earth." Hollis glanced back at the computer screen. "It will impact right here, in the capital, in a year. You need to move everyone." The Pontifex laughed. "Ha! Is that what these machines are telling you? It's all lies, ancient fabrications aimed at disrupting society. There's no danger, there's no truth to be found in the instruments of heretics." 2 guards grabbed Hollis while a third brought the case with the blocker. "However, their mind machine works. We forced your colleague to demonstrate it," the Pontifex explained. "We were wondering how other sects of pre-Reformationists were beating the challenge. How poetic that a device your kind invented to hide and preserve your pernicious lies can also be used to lock them away forever." After midterms, the lecture hall was only half full. Hollis liked weeding out students who were just there for the credit. It made teaching the second half of the course more enjoyable. "I'm not going to shout," Hollis warned. "There's lots of room at the front." She waited while a handful moved, but the bulk stayed where they were. She shrugged. "Okay then. Let's talk about the meaning of the new star in Aries. In the last few weeks, it's been growing rapidly. One of the oldest Sumerian clay tablets with astrological texts states, if a new star appears in the belly of the ram and grows to rival Venus, the harvest will be bountiful. The ram is Aries, and this is the only reference my colleagues and I can find. We've conferred with the Pontifex and determined that the star signifies the coming of a new age of wealth and prosperity. To celebrate, the Pontifex, his family and staff have moved to a retreat in the distant mountains to isolate themselves while they make plans for this glorious future. Your assignment is to consider the positive influence of the new star in your personal chart.
If you enjoyed this story, please share it with your friends or leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps new listeners find us and keeps the podcast going. If you'd like to connect with us, please email makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. This month's story was written by Vern Hume, aka Alan V. Hare, and read by Kathleen Connolly. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdmann. Audio production and editing by Vecada Studios. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial, attribution, no derivative license.